Okay, we should be good now.
Okay, thank you. So we have quorum, so we're going to restart. We're going to go, this is now item 4 on the agenda, the participation presentations of annual reports and requests for committee comments. We're going to start with item 4B, which is Kauaʻi coffee. So take it away, thanks.
Aloha, Lainey. I'm going to share my screen. Is everybody able to see that?
Yes, we can. Thanks, Fred.
Fantastic. First of all, thank you everybody for the discussion up to this point. There's quite a few good things that I'll be taking away for things that we can be doing on our side. So I'll be giving the Kauaʻi Coffee annual report. Permit history. Here's our permit number, ITL 25, issued in June. Permit is for 30 years. And in 2022, no transfer of permits or permit modifications. Straight out of our PIP, our annual calculation, just on the Newell Shearwaters. Thanks for the comment on the name instead of the acronym. I always get those wrong. Basically 1. And over the life of the permit term, 33.3. Here's what we had in 2022. 1 Newell Shearwater found alive and released by SOS. What doesn't show here, because it wasn't part of my actual report, is we did have 1 wedge-tailed shearwater that was also found and released. And because that was the first one that we had found, our both direct and indirect since permit issuance is the same as what we have for 2022. It's also our cumulative. Changes in Seabird response for this year. Our predator surveying and control began earlier in the year compared to 2021. Site search procedures were modified slightly. We went to group searches over designated areas versus individual searching along a specified route. Seemed to allow a greater likelihood of discovery. In fact, the wedge tail that we found was found during the group search. The Newell Shearwater was actually found in the field by the field crews doing their search. So good on both of those. We're going to continue to seek improved lighting for factory area. The idea of sensor activated exterior light so that we can be dark unless there's activity certainly works out well. And I was also intrigued by the use of the Royal Sonesta of the infrared searchers. We had looked into the same thing, but didn't purchase one. If Paul Toner will allow me to come over and play with some of his toys, I would love to do that. And that concludes my presentation, unless there are any specific questions for Kauaʻi Coffee. See Loyal's hand up. Aloha, sir.
Yes. So thanks so much. Have you noticed any differences? And I think you had a fair number of pigs out in the fields when we were setting up the HCP. Have you noticed any change in that?
Actually, the biggest change in pig activity I've noticed since the end of the bird season, and it's primarily associated with rapid weed growth and just the dampness of the soil. We continue to do some trapping efforts on the pig side, but the pigs are not causing a tremendous amount of damage. We are hoping that as we get more clear near the camp area, basically the Numila camp that's near the factory area, that we'll have less of a pig problem nearby. That answer your question?
Yes. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Hey, Fred, I had a question about can you go back to the slide about the search period? You just go back a few, I can't remember which one it was. Maybe the second one, yeah. No.
I think the comments that I made were right here. We're changing this the site search procedures.
Yeah. the search, what's your search time period?
As written in our PIP, we were searching up to 3 hours after sunset and then just prior to sunlight. We're had to modify it slightly just because I don't have shifts that are available just prior to sunlight. And we're changing that just for reference. Our harvest is going on during the fallout season. And we're typically bringing a shift on at 6 in the morning. So what we've been doing is bringing that shift, which is just prior to sunrise. So that shift as they're coming on was participating in that search.
So after sunrise, so 6 a.m. onwards.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, very, very close to sunrise.
Right.
In October timeframe.
Yeah, that seems too late. It should be before dawn.
Certainly noted, and we will be changing that this upcoming year.
Okay. Melissa, I've got one more question, but I'll hang on. I just want to make some notes. Melissa, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Yeah, I was just curious. Can you tell a little bit more about what you're doing for predator surveying and control? I know that's been an ongoing concern across the HCPs, and just curious what your protocols are currently.
So we're working with a contractor, and the contractor is doing surveys as we approach the bird season, and then they're doing trapping and removal through the bird season.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just curious because I think the efficacy of predator removal is really important. What kind of surveying do they do? Is that just a visual search, or do they use camera traps? Do they use baited traps? What do they do?
I'll have to confess a little bit of ignorance there because I'm not sure exactly what they're doing, but I did see their report, and it does have both observations as well as traps. So I think they're doing both.
Okay.
For instance, predator sighted in such and such a location. So they're doing some visual as well as the trapping.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to note that predator removal is a pretty important part of the proving that search efficiency, right? Like you're actually detecting the number that actually fell out, and cats are constantly moving into an area from outside the area, and so it's really important that the searches are intentional, strategic, regular, structured well.
Both for the birds and for the predators.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Do you have what is your, I'm sure it's in the report, what kind of numbers are we talking about for the predator trapping? Like how many cats are trapped over what period?
I don't have those in front of me. Give me a few minutes. I can probably pop them up. I believe it was about 5 per month, but I'd have to get the actual report to verify that. Correct. It was 4 or 5 per month, August through December.
Okay, and was the trapping done continuously throughout the season?
We ended up, for some reason, we had a gap in October, and I'm not sure exactly why. That was one of the questions that was asked during the preparation phase. And I'm not sure if it was something on our side or something on our contractor side.
Okay. I share Melissa's concern about, the issue with cats and both monitoring and trapping, and I'd encourage you to work with the agency staff to go over the permit terms and the methods, and make sure that, that everything's being done to the maximum efficiency and effort as that is possible. Because I believe there is a big problem with ingress with cats from adjacent sites, and those numbers it seems like those numbers should, I know trapping cats is not easy, but that, I want to make sure that is being addressed as much as possible, given the number of cats in the area.
That's one of the reasons we're using a contractor rather than trying to do it ourselves. They're professionals.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Fred, this is Loyal again. So you got a fair number of cats, right? 17 or something like that?
Yes, sir.
And it looked like there's still an issue with people feeding cats, either adjacent to, or that's adjacent to your properties?
It's in the area that's near the factory area, that it is or was residential camp.
So it's on the property?
Yes.
Oh, but it's not like a cat colony. It's somebody feeding their own cat.
We believe so. We don't know for sure. There have been reports, although I don't know that firsthand myself, of potentially cats being dropped off, but I don't have any way to verify that.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Is there any
Thank
other
you.
questions? Sorry, Loyal. Any other questions? I see Jim's joined. That's great. Thanks, Jim. Any public comments?
Sorry, Lainey. I think I just want to note the importance of combination of, like, there's a couple of different metrics to think about, right? One is how many cats are there? Two is how many cats were removed, and then, how many cats remain, right? And what kind of impact are they having? And so just want to really stick a pin in the fact that monitoring of what is on site is really important. And I would love in future years to just hear a little bit more specifically what's being done for detection of the predator. So just want to make that request for future presentations in future years for all the applicants.
Okay. Well, I thought it was an interesting note that the Royal Sonesta, I'm not sure who reported it, but that the handheld infrared scanners actually worked better for predators detection than it did for bird detection. It was certainly better than decoy detection.
I agree. That was interesting.
There's one final question. What kind of staff training is currently happening, and for Seabird recovery? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, we have an entire training matrix for all of our other training as well, and Seabird training is one of those trainings that are required. The entire staff is trained between usually in September is when we try to get the training complete. Not only the full extent of our Seabird program, but then specifically search training as part of that. I was also intrigued by some of the incentive programs that some of the other properties have reported. That's something we would certainly consider doing. Because we don't have activity going on all night long, the ability to shut down all exterior lights except for those that are absolutely necessary is something that, if we're able to implement that, would make a huge difference. Probably not a larger area than a hotel, but we don't have other individuals walking around the property. They're normally in the factory doing the work or driving a harvester doing the work, and we don't have a lot of foot traffic around except for those designated search areas. So that's why we're trying to train. And the lessons learned from the searcher efficiency trials last year, I think we've taken to heart. That's why we changed it from an individual rocking a route. Based on my military time, if you're familiar with a fog walk, you put people literally arm to arm and you comb an area.
Okay. Thanks, Fred. And yeah, I just want to reiterate, please work with the agencies to go over, what the lessons learned and especially for the predator control and predator monitoring. I think that's going to be super important. And the Seabird searching and making sure everything's in compliance with the permit terms.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Fred. I think next, so we'll move on to the next item, which is 4C, Alexander and Baldwin. And we have Sean O'Keefe.
Yeah,
Give me 1 second to make Sean co-host so he can share his slides.
thanks. I was wondering what was going on.
Just a second.
Okay.
Wait, where'd he go? Oh, there we go. Okay, Sean, you should be good now.
Thank you. Okay. Is it up?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, well, first I want to thank Fred for taking the lead off position this year. Usually we go alphabetically. So thanks, Fred. And I also wanted to chime in on his comments about Numilla Camp. Numilla Camp is an area that A and B has let's say jurisdiction over. We have an easement with the new landowner, and we have an obligation to remove the camp. And so I can tell you that all of the occupants, retirees and whatnot that used to live in the camp are now gone as of earlier this year. And I believe the remaining occupants, which are farm workers for Kauaʻi Coffee, are also going to be gone by sometime next week. So, there's nobody there anymore that has cats, but there used to be. And some of the residents had more than one cat. So hopefully whatever problems that has caused will be mitigated by the fact that nobody's living in the camp anymore by the time the season rolls around. So I hope that's helpful to Kauaʻi Coffee's predator control efforts in the coming year. So with that, I'll proceed with my report. Okay, this is just the permit history slide, permit numbers, when the permits were issued and whatnot. This, the A and B facilities now include our Port Allen commercial properties, the Hokulea Village Shopping Center, the Shops at Kukui'ula, which is a separate property from the Kukui'ula development, and the Waipoli Town Center in Kapa'a, another shopping center. The Kukui'ula development and the McBride Resources facilities are no longer owned by A and B and are no longer under our permits. Additionally, we just closed the sale of one of our Port Allen commercial properties in February, I believe, and that's the property occupied by the BEI Brewer fertilizer plant, and so that'll be removed from our permit as well. This is just a slide showing our authorized take from the permits. And this is the slide with our reported take in 2022. And as you can see, the abnormally high Seabird fallout that occurred across the island in 2022 is reflected by the amount of fallout that we had on our property. With our calculated lethal take being at 10.72 and non-lethal at 5.28. So I put a little bit of details below the table. In all, there were 8 birds found at A and B facilities in 2022. 4 live birds were found at our Port Allen facilities by our search teams. 3 of those 4 were on parcels that currently have no lights. So, surrounding lights are obviously influencing the fallout to a degree, because there are no lights on the BEI parcel, where we had 1 bird fall out, and the gravel parking lots fronting the Port Allen Marina Center. There are lights in that parking lot, but they're no longer active, and they were off all year. The bird that was found at the BEI parcel, our searchers found the bird, but they were unable to capture the bird, and the bird actually escaped into the BEI fertilizer plant facility, which is enclosed by a locked fence. And so we were unable to get in there until the next morning, and were unable to find the bird. So that bird, because it was not recovered, we count it as a fatality. There was another live bird that was found at the Port Allen Marina Center that we picked up in the weekly SOS reports. So that was found by someone other than us. We did include that in our take calculation, of course. That was a live bird that was rescued and released. That bird was reportedly found at 7 p.m. on the 21st of November. And that would have been prior to our first searches of the evening, which began around 3 hours after sunset. We had 1 live bird and 1 dead bird at the Hokulea Village Shopping Center. The dead bird was in the landscape border of the shopping center with Kauaʻi, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, highway, which obviously is well lit and has power lines along it. But that side of the property also has, shop fronts that are lit as well. And then we had 1 live bird found at the shops in Kukui'ula, and that was at the Long's Drugs facility. That facility is, although the property is owned by A and B, the building is not. The improvements are not owned by us, but we will be encouraging Long's Drugs to make some specific improvements at their store at the shops in Kukui'ula. Okay, this slide shows our take since permit issuance. As you can see, again, uncharacteristically high fallout in 2022 compared to the 3 birds we recovered in 2020 and 2021 combined. Again, I've highlighted a few things on this slide. Clearly, Port Allen is by far the property that we have with the most fallout. And I think, as everybody knows, there's a lot going on at Port Allen, and so it's probably no surprise, not just due to surrounding facilities, but also due to its location, in the path that the birds take to get out to the sea. We have not found any birds at Waipuhuli since we entered the KSHCP. And I also just wanted to highlight the fact that although we have 14 lethal takes in the table, you know, that we've only found one dead bird on our property in the 3 years. And of course, the other 13 are birds that are assumed to have been lethal takes based on the protocols that are specified by the KSHCP. So I make this comment more just to for those that aren't familiar with the KSHCP, so that it's clear what that 14 lethal takes over the 3-year periods actually represents. And I'm not saying there weren't 14 lethal takes, but I'm saying we only found one dead bird on our property in the 3-year period. Okay, Seabird response during the season. First, I'm going to talk about our search efforts. As in the past, we are doing twice nightly searches at all our facilities. We did not miss any searches in 2022, but from time to time, there are reasons why we have to exclude areas of the property for a limited number of searches, either due to trespasser issues. That's primarily down at Port Allen. Accessibility, which we had some issues at Port Allen this year as well, where we couldn't safely get to part of our property. And then facility maintenance activities, where obviously if there's construction or similar facility maintenance going on, we don't want our searchers at night, we don't want our searchers wandering around in those areas amidst operating equipment. So those exclusions are pretty limited, but I thought they should be mentioned. As far as our search teams, we again relied on the Kauaʻi Community Science Center, which is a nonprofit, to do our searches at Port Allen. We're again extremely pleased with the enthusiasm and motivation of these kids, and you know, I'd like to take the opportunity to you know, highlight their efforts and you know, draw your attention to this very good nonprofit for science education. I think it's, you know, it's making kids interested in science, and this is exactly the kind of thing that's, you know, kind of captivates kids as opposed to sitting in a science class in school, which we've all done. Whether you're a biologist or not, I'm sure you weren't always excited about your science classes. Major change that we made in our search program this year, and this was directly in response to the some of the weak performances on the search trials that were conducted last year. We are no longer using security staff to do our searches. And you know, I don't want to knock our security staff. You know, they did the best they could, but we recognize that, you know, they also have to do security, and sometimes they would have to interrupt a search to deal with a security matter. And so we felt that having folks who were on site for no other reason than to search for seabirds was going to lead to more effective searches. And so our predator control contractor, who we've been very happy with over the 3 years, had indicated to us that they were doing searches at other properties. And so we brought them in to conduct searches at all 3 of our properties. But due to manpower concerns, you know, they weren't able to cover both the evening and morning searches at all the properties. So we also have a landscaping contractor who had previously been trained for seabird recovery, but now has the primary search duty as well. And just to be clear, they're doing that completely separately from their landscaping activities. They don't come in and do landscaping at night. So the crews that they send in at night to do the searches are there to search only. And so nobody is on site doing anything but searches. when we're doing our scheduled searches. So we think that's improved our the effectiveness of our searches, and we certainly hope it has. With some of the new folks, we did notice some issues with log keeping, and even though the searches were conducted and documented, we noticed some shortcomings that we're going to address in our 2023 training sessions, and primarily that has to do with how well they recorded predator presence on the property, which we expect our bird searchers to also note whenever they see any predators on the site and put that in the log. So there was some deficiencies in them, either not so much recording the predators as giving me enough information to assess numbers. So they might say abundant predators instead of 5 predators or something along those lines. So again, we'll be addressing that in the 2023 training sessions. We also, because of the issue that occurred at the BEI facility, we want to make a conscious effort this year for those limited areas on our properties, outdoor areas that we don't always have access to because the tenant has a locked gate. We want to make sure that we have arrangements going into the season where if we need to get in there in a timely manner, we can do that. I think if we had been able to get into the BEI facility, that night even, we might have been able to recover that bird and it could have been released. Now, we don't know what happened to it, but again, the assumption is that it is a fatality. Lighting and facilities. I've identified a few lighting improvements we made this year at Waipuʻuli Town Center. We convinced the McDonald's folks that their main light at the drive-through was a bit much, and they agreed to turn it off during the season. And then also at Port Allen, the gravel parking lots where we have Seabird compliant light fixtures, we've deactivated those fixtures, so those lights aren't on at night. Now there is still lighting because there are street lights near that shopping center that are not our lights, obviously, but street lights. And as I mentioned earlier, 2 of the down Seabirds that we found were on the gravel parking lots where A&B has no light fixtures. At the shops at Kauaʻi, we did a fair amount of lighting improvements in 2021. No projects were done in 2022, but we do have some more improvements planned for 2023. Additionally, one thing I noticed at the facility is some of the improvements we did in 2021, which included masking some of our light fixtures with foil. Those need to be refreshed a bit. And I think what happened there is when folks changed the light bulbs out, they have the foil now facing in the not quite the right direction. And so the foil isn't doing what it was put in place to do. So we'll either fix that or we'll foil the entire fixture. But previously the side of the light that was facing in towards the building was not masked with foil. And we'll also be reaching out to some of our tenants about lighting improvements, and Longs will be on the top of that list. I did want to bring up one of our lighting issues at Port Allen, which became more apparent as activities kind of returned to normal there. There is a tour boat activity in what we call the steel warehouse, and they do their catering preparations either in the evening, or this is my understanding, either in the evening or the early morning. And so they have the lights on in the warehouse. And as you can see, it shines through. Now, these are not windows either on the side of the building or on the roof. What these are semi-opaque fiberglass panels. And as you can see, they illuminate when the lights are on inside the building. So we're going to be identifying and hopefully implementing a solution to that in this off season. And I just wanted to point out, these are two pictures of this building that were taken on the same night. And the first picture was taken around 10:30, and the second picture where the lights are on was taken shortly after 7 o'clock. So for the most part, you know, the building is dark at night, but we need to do something about these opaque panels that are allowing light to shine through, you know, when the lights are turned on inside the building. There's a few other minor improvements I think we need to make at Port Allen, and I'll be presenting those to the property management team probably in April, so that we have time to make those improvements. Mainly it's, you know, tenants that have kind of strayed from their original lighting programs in terms of, you know, what has motion detectors, what doesn't, and lighting in exposed windows. So we'll be working on that before the 2023 season, just to get everybody tuned up again and making sure there's no backsliding on the lighting improvements that had already been made. Another challenge we had as far as facility maintenance in 2022 was that two of our long tenured property management staff at Port Allen, and in fact, the only on-site property management staff at Port Allen, are no longer with the company because we sold substantial amounts of our Kauaʻi holdings. They became employees of the new owners. And so one of those employees had been there for more than 30 years. Both of them had been involved in Seabird lighting issues since before there was a KSHCP. And so that's a big loss for us, but you know, hopefully we'll be able to bring the new staff up to speed prior to the 2023 season. And of course, they're going to get a crash course when I meet with them about things we need to do before the season starts. On our predator control program, we did do a update to our predator control plan. We really didn't make any substantive changes to what we're doing, but we made sure that the predator control plan reflected all the things that we're already doing, and so that the plan is, you know, fully in compliance with the guidance that the agencies have provided. So for example, you know, the surveys prior to, during, and at the end of the season, those weren't in our original predator control plan. We were doing them, but now they're documented in the plan. We began our predator control efforts at all facilities on August 8th, and those continued throughout the season. I believe there was one day missed at all the facilities. It might have been Thanksgiving. It was a holiday where they knew they weren't going to be able to check the traps that day, so they did not set the traps. But other than that, we had pretty much full coverage at all of the facilities in terms of traps being set. And there was a total of 1,106 trap nights with the 4 facilities combined. The surveys, we do we have our predator control contractor come out and do a nighttime survey looking for cats before we start trapping. So that'll be, you know, maybe right at the beginning of August. And then a preseason survey. So that would be done just prior to September 15th, after we've already done trapping for some 2 or 3 or 4 weeks. A mid-season survey, and then an end-season survey. All of those surveys had very low numbers, except for at Waipouli Town Center, which I'll talk about shortly. But we're talking, one or two cats in each survey. I think the most we saw in any of those surveys was 2 cats, but most of them were 1 cat. Now we call those snapshot surveys because it's one night. They go out for one night and they try and get an idea of, how bad is it looking, and they'll try and guide their preseason trapping efforts to the extent they can based on those surveys. But the other thing we do is, as I mentioned earlier, as part of our searches for seabirds, our searchers are also looking for and recording predators. And then we use those numbers to try to estimate what our predator counts did over the course of the season. So you can see that represented in the last bullet point. And just for clarity, those numbers are from start of season to end of season. Those do not reflect the reductions that occurred prior to the start of the season. And actually, about 40 to 45% of the cats we trapped in 2022 were caught prior to the start of the season. Okay, we continue to have issues at Waipauli with an off-site cat colony. That combined with tampering and theft of traps complicates our predator control efforts at that facility. Nevertheless, I think we did fairly well, even though our snapshots, even our snapshot surveys showed a reduction of from 8 to 10 predators at Waipauli in the pre-trapping survey to 4 at the end of the season. Now, we'd much rather be at 0, but I think in light of the cat colony, it's a reasonable reduction. We did, as I mentioned, we did have some log keeping issues. That was primarily at Waipauli, where the nightly surveys are probably not good numbers because they weren't always recorded. So I had to make some assumptions when somebody said abundant cats, how many cats is that? I tried to be conservative and use high numbers, but the numbers we need to be recording better data in the coming year. Also, we noticed that the number of cats on the property that were seen during the nightly surveys, there was a significant difference between the early morning search and the late evening search. So we believe that's a function of when the cats are normally fed and they start to gravitate towards the property from some of the offsite areas. I am working with my predator contractor to see if we can come up with a solution to this cat colony. Trapping of hungry well-fed cats is not easy. So we're going to look at what other options might be available. Another issue I wanted to mention with respect to predator control is the feral chicken issue, and this is especially a problem down at Port Allen. And of course, the chickens will go in the cat traps and set them off. And if there's a chicken in there, we're not going to get a cat that night. So I have discussed with my predator control contractor a separate chicken control effort that we'll initiate during the off season and try and get that population knocked down. But I'm sure anybody that has spent any time on Kauaʻi or has tried to catch chickens knows that it's a tough order. Training program. Our training includes, our property management personnel and other staff, maintenance staff, security staff. and of course, our search teams and our predator control teams. So a total of 46 personnel were trained in 2022. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to focus a little bit on our record keeping in the 2023 training program to make sure folks understand, it's important that we get good, accurate information about predator counts on the property, among other things. And then, as I previously mentioned, we're going to be doing more outreach to tenants about things they can do to help to ensure that all our lighting is as it should be at the properties. Challenges and changes for 2023. I already mentioned about the BEI property being sold. We are considering expanding the property at the shops at Kauaʻi that's covered by the permit. There is an off-site parking lot that we're gonna try and bring in. We would have done it last year, but I didn't realize the paperwork that was needed for that. So I'll try and get something turned in shortly and see if we can't get that parking lot added in. And then, of course, we would alter our, it's already got compliant lighting, but we would alter our search program and our predator control program if that property gets incorporated into the permit. And then, of course, the cat colony is an ongoing challenge that we have. I believe that's the last slide. It's I don't know if let's see. I'm not sure how to share. Oh, stop share. Okay. Stop share. That must be it. Okay. Happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you, Sean. Loyal, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. So Sean, the sale of your properties, how do you think that is going to affect your Seabird take?
Well, yeah, I can talk about that in detail. So when we sold Kauaʻi and the McBride properties, there really wasn't any impact. Neither of those properties had any take up to the point when we sold them. And really, both of those facilities were kind of included in the permits because we were getting the permits anyways, and we might as well get protection in case a bird came down. So we did include, I think, a token bird. I think it was one bird every 10 years or something of that nature for Kauaʻi. And we kept that in our permit when we terminated the coverage. So those two sales, we don't expect to have any effect. At the BEI parcel, as I mentioned, that is an unlit parcel. Now, we did have a bird this year that came down on that parcel, but it's hard to, say it was, had anything to do with the parcel because they don't have any nighttime lighting. So what we do is when we sell a property that's in the KSHCP is, we make sure that the buyer is aware of the program and that, there are, that it's their option if they want to participate. But the sites that I mentioned up thus far, plus the Port Allen solar farm, which we also sold right at the beginning of the 2020 season, none of those sellers, to my knowledge, have considered participating in the KSHCP up to this time. Now, we sold another property down at Port Allen within the last year or so. And I'm mentioning that one because that was an undeveloped parcel that now has a building on it. So I think there might be another sale pending down at Port Allen, and that's one of the things that can affect the overall situation down there, because it's a congested area with a lot of facilities with outdoor lights, and And so when undeveloped properties get sold and developed, then that's just one more, lit facility that everybody's got to kind of be aware of. Does that answer your question?
It did. Thank you very much.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah,
Oh,
go ahead,
go ahead.
Lynn.
Oh.
Uh,
Go ahead.
so-
Okay, I'll go ahead. Sorry, mine's a really quick one. Thanks. That was a thorough presentation. I just had a question about the property that has the cat colony. Do you know who is the owner?
It's a drainage ditch. Believe it's owned by the county of Maui, county of Kauaʻi. Sorry, I'm on Maui, county of Kauaʻi.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Melissa.
No problem. I have what is probably a dumb question. I'm wondering if you can just remind me about how the properties were selected for who was going to have the decoys tested and what the possibility is of third-party checks. I really appreciate, Sean, all of the slides that you showed on what you guys are doing to increase predator checks and control. And I appreciate you detailing that. And I'm just, I'd love to be able to have a better understanding, because at the end of the day, we're all trying to do better, right? We want these species to recover. We want to make sure that all of these impacts are being mitigated for. And so these are opportunities for us to learn what works and what doesn't work. And so having like a third-party check that could come in and say, hey, we have a natural experiment here. We've got different sites doing different things under different circumstances. What's working here? What's maybe not working there? How can we overall improve things, not just on this HCP, but again, ESRC, we have an eye on the other HCPs as well. So I don't know, can someone remind me just how the properties were selected for where the decoy checks were done?
Well, my understanding is that the decoy tests that were done this year were based on the results from last year. That's what I understood. So I don't know much more beyond that.
That's correct. And sorry, Melissa, was your question about this year's tests or last year's tests?
This year's test, and just how the properties were selected that participated in that. Sorry, I must have missed that bit.
Okay.
Okay, so it was based off of the ones that had particularly low search efficiency last year. They were tested again this year. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I think just noting, based on the broader discussion we had earlier, I think it would be really helpful just to have a better feel across properties for this with third-party tech. So I'll just note that.
Melissa, was that an action item that you're requesting, or is that just something?
Well, I don't know if Jim or Michelle or anyone else wants to comment on, where they've seen that be useful or not useful elsewhere, and, with a broader range of experience than I have. Whether that's something the rest of the committee would like to see or not, I'm not sure.
I'm so sorry, Melissa. I have a dog that was needing to go outside, and I stepped away for 10 seconds, and now I've missed what it was that you were suggesting, and I don't want to make you
No
repeat
problem.
it. But specifically, I heard Lainey ask, is this an action item? Is there a particular product?
Briefly, I was asking for clarification on how the properties were selected, where the decoy checks were done, and they mentioned that it was done at properties that had particularly low compliance last year. And I was commending Sean on, I really appreciated the presentation portions that showed us what they're doing to improve their predator control at those properties, especially given the proximity of the cat feeding colonies, the number of cats we saw when we were on site a few years back. But just wondering about third-party checks, kind of not specifically necessarily because of the site, but broadly speaking, whether that might be a useful thing for us to think about using, I don't know, doing some sort of third-party check.
Yeah, understood. And that is something that the agencies can discuss. I think the challenge here is just that it was it's labor intensive to do that level of third party monitoring at all sites and all years, just because you have to do that on at night during the same time of the year. So it's bodies are the limiting factor, right? So I think we just need to talk about how do we do that well, and what's the goalpost that we're trying to meet.
If I can jump in just with my
Please.
thoughts on it. I mean, we tried this in the past and never really got very far with it with KWP1. But I think it would be very useful. I mean, I've always felt that third-party monitoring would be the way to go anyway. But I do recognize the challenges of that in terms of how many people it takes to search all sites and so forth on a consistent basis. But at a minimum, just using third-party to do just a periodic random check, I think would be very useful, because it would help us calibrate really what's being reported by each of the permittees in terms of what they're finding, what their effectiveness is, and also matching that with the results of the trials that Johnny and had described earlier. So I think it's something we should definitely consider and see whether it could be deployed in a place like this.
I'll just mention that, we didn't have a formal program for, with a scientific basis like the work that was described earlier in on the call here. But I know that the contractor that our predator control contractor had their own internal monitoring program for basically making sure that their employees were doing what they were supposed to be doing. And again, I know that's not science, and I didn't even ask them to share the results of that, because I didn't want to have information that was misleading. But I did ask them, generally what did it show, and they said, well, it showed that people were doing the searches. So there's a difference between doing the searches and doing an effective search. But I am encouraged by the fact that on their own volition, my contractor determined that they needed to not just sign a contract with me, but make sure that their employees were performing to a standard that they were promising me. So for what that's worth, if nothing else, it shows the value of picking the right contractor, I think, someone that thinks about those things and cares about them.
Yeah, I think that's a good practice, and I think it's very useful. That being said, it would be good to get a little bit more documentation in terms of what that is and how they're doing it and so forth, rather than just as it is right now, it's sort of hearsay in terms of we think they're doing the right thing, but we're trying to hone in on a more correct answer, and so that would be really useful, if nothing else, in your next annual report, to have that information too.
And to be clear, I'll also say that independent third-party monitoring is not typically a requirement of HCPs and is not common across all of our HCPs and permits. However, in this case, it is a valuable asset in helping to determine when and where adaptive management is needed in order to ensure compliance with the permit. And so I think it serves a different function here, and a valuable function here, in a way that is not quite the same as many other actions that this committee assesses.
I think it's worthwhile to continue to explore this a bit more, though, in further discussions, not necessarily at this meeting here, but for example, with the wind farms, there's been a real shift from the employee searching to canine searches, and that's shown to be extremely effective. And there seems to be somewhat of consistency across the different programs in terms of how they're doing it. And I realize that there would be potentially some real challenges in terms of canine searches on some of the properties, especially resorts and things like that. But it's something that really, I think it would be worthwhile to at least discuss and see where it might be appropriate, or whatever it would take to get more confidence in the results that are coming back in terms of the effectiveness of the searches. And I've always said, I'm just going to get this. It's a pet peeve. I'm going to keep saying it. Instead of searcher efficiency, it's really a searcher effectiveness, or searcher efficacy is what we're really looking for. It's not efficiency, how fast they can do it or how, whatever. It's whether they do it right or not. So
Thank you for the semantics fix. Yeah, thanks for the semantics fix. I'll fix my semantics on that. And I will say too, I mean, I would love to see the plan include strategic and intentional searches or checks on things. I'll just note again, when we did that site visit, what was it, 4 years ago now or whatever, every single site we visited, we saw cats just walking when we were walking around. And so, and it was like, well, how do you do your predator control? Oh, well, we call when we see one. It's like, well, there's one right over there. You might want to make a call. And it was every single site, right? I'm not singling anyone out. It was every single site. So just spot checks can be as simple as, are we still seeing predators on site? And all the way up the spectrum, across the spectrum of more structured checks.
Is there any more questions or feedback for Sean?
No questions, but Sean, thanks for a great presentation and walking us through all of the changes that you've made since last year. Really appreciate the attention to detail and making those adaptive management shifts, particularly around Port Allen.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Next, we're going to go to item 4G, which is Hawaii Department of Transportation.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. Happy to see all the committee members. My name is Greg Spencer. I'm with H.T. Harvey and Associates, and we have been providing habitat conservation planning and implementation support for HDOT on Kauaʻi and also Maui for the last few years. And I'm going to talk with you today about 2022's implementation of the KSHCP at HDOT facilities on Kauaʻi. And I can share my screen here. I think I can share my screen here.
I just need Kate a minute to make you co-host.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't have that power, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
You should have it, but let me double check. Yeah, you've got it.
Okay, thanks, Kate. So as I say, it's a pleasure to be here with everybody today, and there's been some really good discussion, questions, and feedback among everybody. I'm gonna review our permit history, talk a little bit about the covered facilities, discuss facility lighting, annual training and outreach, monitoring and reporting, talk about predator control, and then we'll discuss the authorized take, the 2022 observed and calculated take, and then what we've seen in terms of take since permit issuance. First of all, can everybody see the screen just fine?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lainey. So just quick review. Permits were issued in 2020, and then 2022 is the third year of KSHCP implementation. And these are the three covered facilities for HDOT. Lihue Airport. This is an image showing the AOA at nighttime, which is the active portion of the airfield. Nowili Harbor. Both of these facilities are close to one another in the town of Lihue on the southeastern side of Kauaʻi. And then Port Allen Harbor, which is further to the west, also there on the coast. Just to discuss facility lighting a little bit. HDOT completed all of its lighting upgrades to meet its compliance obligations by 2020. So we're not in the process right now of making additional upgrades to meet compliance targets. However, one of the achievements in 2022 was we placed a shield over the main warehouse light on the upland side of the warehouse to reduce glare coming off of that light. That light had been a concern, and we'd been discussing it for a while and trying to identify a solution to reduce that apparent glare. So we placed that shield on, and it appears to be working really well. Just as a kind of a review, this light is programmed to go off at 8:30 each night, so it doesn't come on again until I think it illuminates the pier and the pedestrian walkway just in the early morning for I think 45 minutes or so before the sun comes up. This light's important because it illuminates the parking area and it provides a safe corridor for traffic, primarily people coming off of the tour boats, so that they can cross the parking lot and access their vehicles in the upland parking area. And it also provides a little bit of illumination for the parking lot itself. There's quite a lot of activity just among the general public that happens there at nighttime. And then also in 2022 at Lihue Airport, the public parking lot was resurfaced. And so in the course of that resurfacing, some of the older generation lights were replaced with new lights. So it's not a system upgrade in the sense that we're trying to, come up to, well, meet a compliance obligation per se, or meet a criteria, but the lights were just changed out. So we went from an older style light to a new style light. And that's about all I've got on facility lighting of relevance for this last year. We do annual training and outreach at each of the facilities. Our general Seabird awareness and response reaches an awful lot of people within at Lihue Airport. We touch on a lot of staff within the airport's division, airport security, Nauwiliwili Harbor. Similarly, we provide training for Harbor's division staff, which are all of the folks that actually work at the harbor in operations and management, as well as harbor security. And at Port Allen, we also extend that annual training to harbor division staff that are stationed there at Port Allen. We also provide annual Seabird searcher training that is a combination of the general awareness and response, but also focuses specifically on various aspects of the training itself. And this is focused on the field biologists that perform the nightly and early morning searches, as well as the harbor security guards who also engage in the dedicated search effort and who perform surveillance at the facilities all day and all night. And these folks are associated with or affiliated with H.T. Harvey and Associates and also Allied Universal Security. An outreach component is something that goes on throughout the season. We use outreach to connect with vendors and tenants. So for example, at Lihue Airport, we reach out to and provide educational information to the rental car agencies by connecting with rental car agency managers and then getting out into the lots and trying to extend that outreach to the people who are actually working on the ground in the rental car lots, so they know what, so they can identify seabirds, and so they have a roadmap in terms of response and reporting down birds. We also extend that outreach to facility maintenance folks and airline crews at the airport. At Nauwiliwili Harbor, our primary tenants, Matson and Young Brothers, are the focus of outreach that occurs throughout the year. We reach out to them early in the season, like we do with the general awareness and response training. We provide them with copies of the training modules that we present to others. We ask them and encourage them to share that with their staff We present, and we also provide copies of this fact sheet that you can see here on the left in the slide. It's a two-sided fact sheet. I'm only showing one side of it, but it gives you some idea of this kind of quick reference resource that people can use in the event that they find a bird and just to increase their awareness. And then at Port Allen, we work with the commercial tour boat operators who are active every day down there and who are there at night and in the early morning hours and who have been helpful in the past in terms of sharing their observations with us. And also historically, they've been first finders and responders to down seabirds in the past. So keeping a communication and outreach strong with them, as well as the general public, is really important down there. For monitoring and reporting, we had trained personnel on the ground at each facility conducting the searches twice a day, both in the evening. We tend to start, we tend to cover the period about 2 to 5 hours following sunset because of the length of time that we dedicate to the searches themselves and the fact that we have found birds early and we've had birds that have come to our attention through SOS that have come down earlier in the evening. So we try to cover a pretty broad area on both sides of that 3 to 4 hour window. And then again in the morning, 1 to 2 hours prior to sunrise. We had 7 Newell shearwaters this year at all facilities combined. 4 at Lihue Airport, 1 at New Willy Harbor, and 2 at Port Allen. And one of the birds at Lihue Airport sustained some injuries and had to be euthanized in veterinary care. All the others were received a green light and were successfully released. And for each down seabird incident, we followed the procedures and protocols in the KSHCP and submitted our reports to DOFA and Fish and Wildlife Service. So I'm going to show here some of the trends that we observed at Lihue Airport with the predator control program in 2022. We did 4 days of pre-season survey effort in early September to give us an idea where we were starting at with the average number of cats that we would be encountering in the public area. And we came up with about 3.5 as an average for a starting point. I'll remind you that trapping for mammals on the ground occurs at Lihue Airport year round. So we were not able to necessarily do a pre-trapping snapshot, but we did get in there to look at sort of what our baseline was before the seabird season got underway. There were 10 traps deployed throughout the season in 2022 for 920 trap nights. Eight of these traps were in the AOA and 2 were in the public access area. And all of the animal control efforts, by way of sort of a review, at Lihue Airport are performed in cooperation with USDA Wildlife Services in alignment with the Wildlife Hazard Management Plan. In 2022, USDA Wildlife Services conducted a searcher efficiency trial. They estimated 85% discovery rate across the entire facility. Their sample size was 18 carcasses of West-tailed shearwaters, and the discovery times were in the early pre-dawn hours from about 4 a.m. to just before 7 a.m. And 3 of those specimens were not found. So the graph just kind of shows you the number of cats that were observed throughout the season nightly in the public area only. And we can see that there's generally a fairly consistent presence of cats, although we may have seen a decline from our starting point where we had generally a mean just under 2.5 birds or 2.5 cats seen on the nightly surveys throughout the season, but no significant decline overall. Trends observed at harbors. In Willy Willy Harbor, again, we did a survey before the beginning of the season. Predator control activities at New Willy Willy Harbor got started pretty early. I think maybe even towards the end of August, first part of September. We got in there and we did our surveys to get a baseline in early September. So trapping may have just started, but we think our preseason estimate was a pretty good indication of what was there at the time. And then they consistently had 2 traps, sometimes as many as 4, but consistently 2 traps that they set and moved around as necessary throughout the season. They would move those traps based on what we were able to communicate to them about where we're seeing cats, essentially the same kind of thing that we did last year and in 2020. And we saw about a 56% reduction in the detection rate over the course of the season. So very, very happy with the way that we were able to reduce the presence of cats at New Willy Willy Harbor. And we hope we can see that continue. And I think that's just a reflection of the coordination and, the fact that it's a very secure facility as well. At Port Allen Harbor, we only saw 1 cat in 2022 on October 17th. None were captured and removed. And I know this was a shock last year with low numbers of cats seen at Port Allen. And it was surprising again to see such low presence this year. But aside from that low presence, we don't have much of a trend to report for Port Allen Harbor in 2022. So here's just a review. We saw this earlier in Lindsay's presentation. Our authorized 30-year take for Newell Shearwaters, Hawaiian petrels, Banner Rump storm petrels by facility. And here's our observed and calculated take in 2022, limited to Newell Shearwaters only. Again, observed and calculated. And the calculated take estimates incorporated the discovery rates, facility-specific discovery rates, and then the survivorship estimates for SOS released Newell Shearwater fledglings. And the totals are the sum of the calculated values. So this is for 2022. And then this is a lethal and non-lethal take since permit issuance in 2020. So we're up to close to 13 lethal Newell Shearwaters for all sites combined, just under 10 non-lethal. And for Hawaiian petrels, we had one lethal Hawaiian petrel take at Port Allen or at Willy Willy Harbor in 2020, and we haven't seen another one since then. And again, just to recap, we used the facility-specific discovery rates and the survival estimates for Newell Shearwaters in those calculations. And I should have just reminded the committee members that I'm open for questions at any point. So it wasn't my intention to leave questions and answers and discussion until the very end, but I sort of have reached the end. And so we can go back to any slides that folks would like to go back and review. But I thank you for your time and your support, and happy to answer any questions.
You actually just answered my main one, Greg. Thank you. I had gotten a note just to make sure that the SOS survivorship things had been factored into your take estimates for the year. So thank you for doing that.
Absolutely. We've gone back and we recalculated the 2020 and 2021 estimates also. So those are included in those totals.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
Thanks for walking us through the information.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
So Gregory, I appreciate the effort you've gone to document, monitor, detect, and remove predators on site.
Yep.
And I'm just wondering if I can hear from Fund Fish and Wildlife Service regarding whether the discovery rates that were written into the HCP, if we still feel comfortable with those given predators at the site. Are all those things kind of coming together where we feel comfortable with the discovery rates as they are?
Is that a question for Michelle or for me?
I'm sorry, Gregory. Yeah, I'm hoping to hear that answer from Michelle and from Lainey.
Okay. Thanks, Melissa.
Lainey, do you want to go first?
Not particularly.
So like I said, I do think that this is, as of right now, it's an under adaptive management, right? Our goal is to assess where permittees are relative to the assumptions that were made in their permit. It's not a necessary, I'm going to be careful about my words here, but just because it's off for right now doesn't necessarily mean that amendment is immediately warranted. Our goal, especially in these first couple of years, has been to assess where permittees are relative to the assumptions that were in their document and help them get through adaptive management to a point where they are meeting the expectations that were in their permit, and therefore the assumptions remain hold. If, however, it is not possible to get to those assumptions, or those assumptions were made under a different set of circumstances, or adaptive management is not getting us to the point where we have confidence that that detectability is appropriate, then yes, the agencies, well, I'll speak for Fish and Wildlife Service. Fish and Wildlife Service would recommend to the permittee that they amend their permit to take into account a different discovery rate that they can maintain.
So that was a general question, right, Michelle or Melissa?
So I feel like that was a general answer. I actually had a more specific question, which is, given that to support the applicant, the participants in adaptive management to ensure compliance with the HCP, we need to know whether we're on track for the discovery rates that were written into that. So my direct question is, do we feel like we're on track for that, given that there are still quite a few? I mean, you know, I was seeing 8 predators that 8 cats detected on site at a number of those months, right, that were checked. And that's a lot of cats when we know that a single cat can take out 20 birds in a colony. I can only imagine what 8 cats can do at a site. For downed birds, right? They're very smelly, they're easy to find. And so just a more direct question to Michelle and Lainey is, how do we feel we're doing as far as is continued adaptive management needed to get closer to the discovery rate that was actually written in there?
Well, we're, as Michelle mentioned, you know, we are currently in discussions with the 2 agencies, and we're reviewing the information that we have now, which we only just, you know, this is ongoing, but we have more information now than we did before. So we're going to be reviewing that and discussing it, and then making that determination. I know that's a very general answer to your very specific question. Sorry.
I can be slightly more specific and say that I don't have an answer for you related to HDOT, Melissa. What I can say, though, is that our staff are reviewing both the predator control information that the permittees submitted, as well as the detection, what their detection rates were this year, as best as it can be assessed. And the agencies will be providing letters to the permittees, letting them know, well, first there will be a meeting, right? So there will be a meeting to go through where those gaps are and identify if there are things that still need to happen in order to ensure that the assumptions that were made in the HCP are appropriate.
Okay, so Jim, are you there still? I don't see your camera on, but I assume you're there still. I'm just wondering whether maybe you can chime in then on, like, what would you want to see in presentations from participants that could help us assess whether those discovery rates are on target or not, when they're presenting to us as DSRC. Because I know that the agencies are doing things in the background, but you and I and Kavika and Loyal are here, and we just are seeing what's presented to us here. And so trying to figure out how we make a good assessment of those numbers, which at the end of the day say, here's the number that were killed and that we know were killed. Here's the number we're estimating were killed as far as seabirds. And then there's that other side of then growing, making up for those numbers up in the mountains.
Yeah, no, I was trying to get to that point a little bit earlier in some of my questions, because I think it is very confusing, and I realize that it's startup time. We're trying to feel our way around in terms of really what the numbers are and so forth. I mean, I do have concerns in terms of if there was very low discovery rate of birds in trials, previously. Whether there's a recalculation of the take estimate for those earlier years. I mean, I think that's something we're going to have to address at a certain point, because it may become very critical later on in terms of getting close to that threshold. I guess I feel a little bit hamstrung in terms of addressing some of these issues when Fish and Wildlife Service and DOFA are meeting with the permittees sort of in private, and then I appreciate getting their letters of recommendation when it comes to a meeting such as this, as we did get today. But I mean, this is a thing that I would appreciate really having that information be part of a more general discussion among the committee, of which both the service and DOFA are members of the committee. And so we discuss it as a whole. I mean, so we can bring our expertise in also to help wade through that. And it's not that I don't have confidence in DOFA or in Fish and Wildlife Service in terms of having the expertise also, but again, this is part of what our purpose is on the committee. And so, again, I'm still struggling with trying to understand how to really recognize that the validity, I guess, of the discovery rates, and how that really relates to also the predator control and the predator load that's in an area, because predators aren't going after the decoys, and so we still have a ways to go, I think, to understand really how well this is working and whether those estimated detection rates are really valid or not. So
I can appreciate that a lot, Jim. I shared sort of like what we did. What did we implement? How did we do it right this year? What were our findings? But I generally, I mean, you haven't presented me a question on this per se, but I want to just chime in and let you know that we took the results from last year from the DOFA trials. We also conducted a trial, and we looked at what the results were, and we said, look, there's some interesting lessons to be learned here. Whether we thought that the trials were done, perfectly or not, if there were, issues or caveats, as they like to say, there always are. But, we wanted to understand, what are the things that we can do better, right? So we incorporated some really important lessons learned into our training this year. Not because we thought that a third-party trial might happen and we might not know about it, but because we want to find these birds. We want to ensure that we find as many of these birds as we possibly can and get them into SOS care as fast as possible. So we want to have high performance, when we review ourselves internally too, right? So we tried to take those lessons and turn them into, an effective capacity to improve. So we did do that in 2022, and we'll do that again in 2023. We'll continue to build upon it, and we'll use the feedback that we get from the committee and the agencies to focus on the things that seem most critical, where we can see improvements emerge from that. If that speaks to your concerns about uncertainty.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Gregory, and the work that you folks are doing to address those things. And I guess where my brain is struggling, and this isn't necessarily because of anything anyone said, but just my scientist brain is saying, okay, what are the data types and how do they fit together to give me an answer, right? And so I'm just trying to figure out how all these different pieces of data, what's going on with the predators at the site, what's going on with number of downed birds, what's going on with searcher efficacy, what's going on with, all these different pieces, and how that combines to help me to know how to interpret the numbers that are presented in terms of how many birds are actually needing to be made up for each year. So my brain is just trying to do that calculation, and I'm struggling to see how all the numbers are going to fit together because it's not a direct formula. So anyways, just trying to ask questions that help me put it on the appropriate shelves in my brain so that it fits together into a clearer picture.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I do that all the time too.
Yeah, and I appreciate the fact that we do have assumptions on the table. And so what we're really trying to do is we're trying to test the validity of those assumptions. And that's a real critical thing, because just even a slight change in some of those may change your take value considerably, either one way or the other. And so I think it's important. And I realize that we're in all of these projects, we're still a long way off from the end of the projects. And so, that terminal take level is still hopefully somewhat quite far off, but at the same time, trying to get that honed into really what is the trajectory is really important. So I think it's really critical to know, how many, ultimately it's how many birds are coming down, and then because that really relates to what needs to be done to mitigate them. And there's, the thing in terms of how well they're detected, whether predators are taking them or not. I mean, those are all really critical pieces to this puzzle right here. So, I think we need to be, this really needs to be data driven as much as possible. And so, I'm hoping we can continue this, the predator detection trials. I think that's a really key part of it. And also, certainly the bird detection trials. I think those are going to be very, very, very key things here.
I think Lisa, did you have your hand up earlier? Did you want to say something?
Sorry, yeah. So as we were kind of stepping back on larger scale issues, I wanted to remind everybody, as hard as this group of permittees is working on permit compliance, there are other parts of our community that are supporting feral cat colonies. And if people were to take a look at HB 220, we are, as we are working here on this today, other parts of our community are working on establishing spay and neuter programs so they can be releasing animals as well. And I think we need to realize that these are not sites that are operating in a vacuum. They're in a community and an urban environment, and what's happening in other areas is also impacting what everybody's able to achieve as well. So I think it's bigger than just the permits here even.
I appreciate that acknowledgement, Lisa. And I think that all of us in this space are very aware of those various different things taking place. I think in this particular moment, the decision makers for the particular things that folks have control over in this setting are the participants and their control over their properties, and DLNR and Fish and Wildlife Service and ESRC. So those are the ones that we can talk about in this space, but I certainly think we're all very aware of the many things, and thankfully with the other hats we wear in other spheres, we're working to get all the different parts of the system working better toward conservation goals.
And yeah, and Lisa, good point about what's going on in the general community. We grapple with that every day. Luckily, for this year, HB 220 did die, but it does come up every year or a similar effort. It's not going to go away. I agree with you there. But yeah, thanks, Gregory. I appreciate what you're saying about looking. I think you're being really proactive in looking at the data and and making those necessary changes. So, thank you for that. Welcome to the committee if you've got any suggestions in general about how to improve searcher efficiency and predator efficiency, predator management efficiency. This is the best place to bring them up, or we can, if you wanted an action item to have a specific discussion about that, or sorry, a general discussion about that in particular in the future, we could do that.
Lainey, one suggestion that I might have is that, and this is something that we'll probably need to talk about for future sessions, but both for the benefit of the agencies and for the benefit of ESRC, it might be helpful in terms of reporting format if we have some very basic piece in there that says, based on the information that we collected this year, we believe that we are meeting our detectability assumption that was in our permit. And next phase, we believe that we have met the full extent of the guidance related to predator control. And I think, even though that's a very rudimentary metric, it might help just in terms of helping the committee and the agency identify where we need to spend time and attention on doing a deeper dive.
And Michelle, to clarify, with detectability, is that for birds or for predators or both?
So, for each permit, for each permittee, they have a defined detectability metric for their permit, right? So most are 50%, but not all. And so whatever that is, I think it's just a question mark of, based on the data that you collected this year, is that consistent with whatever that assumption was for your permit?
Okay, and why they believe it is or it's not. Yeah. Okay.
As we wade through some of these really critical issues, I mean, again, we're trying to use this as a data/science driven process, and using that information as best as possible. And we've done that with some of the other groups, such as bats and so forth, in terms of trying to understand how to move forward. But one thing is, as far as talking about predator control and so forth, I mean, I'm sort of frustrated because I think, quite honestly, a lot of the predator control efforts that we've talked about in many of the projects just seem to be effort, and it's not really clear in terms of really where they're going and whether they're being effective or not. There are other programs that have put an awful lot of effort into predator control and trying to understand, what level is really necessary to make a difference. Where do you get that threshold? And I would recommend trying to see if we can have an informational agenda in our item on one of our future meetings, where we bring in some of this expertise. There's that predator working group, which I think is really outstanding and has a lot of information. Certain groups such as Oahu Army Natural Resources Group has really put an awful lot of effort into looking at predator control and how and what is effective and what is not. And so that might be a really useful thing, rather than sort of this reinventing it that we seem to be doing with these different projects. And the more we can standardize effective methodology, I think would be really, really critical.
So what I'm hearing is a request for a future agenda item for, it could be a single agenda item that we bring in one expert to talk about predator control efficacy, but we could go beyond that to have, we've had entire multi-day workshops in the past, as Michelle is very familiar with. So that it could be something that's very straightforward, or it could be something which could be done relatively quickly, or it could be something a lot that goes into a lot more in depth, but that's going to take a lot longer to put together.
Yeah, I would recommend having just really, an agenda item that brings in, we schedule for, say, like an hour or so, and we bring in some expertise in talking about, what are the real challenges in terms of predator control? What are the concerns? What are the considerations, and what are the tools in sort of a brief presentation? So that would set the stage for whether we need to go further in developing more of a workshop or something like that, also to be able to deal with some of these issues.
I would suggest that it cover the range of environmental settings as well, as opposed to simply or limiting it to bringing in, the knowledge base that comes from controlling cats, in the mountains, for example. Right.
Yeah, good point, because this is a very different setting.
A great
Well,
suggestion.
and the
Go ahead.
goalpost is different here, and gosh, this is I don't want to do a deep dive because we could spend the next 5 hours talking about this. Honestly, I could. The goalpost is different here. Like when we're talking about predator control for the benefit of seabirds in a colony, or forest birds, or our water birds, or for our other endangered species or critical habitats, we're often talking about how do we create the most durable conservation value by doing predator control in a long-term effective way. In this case, the goalpost here is a little bit different. Not to say that we don't always want durable conservation and good outcomes, but our goal here is to make sure that a bird that comes down is still there at the time of a search, or has a higher likelihood of still being present within a search area at the time that a search occurs. And so there is this interplay between predator control and your searching methodology. And that means that the way in which you do predator control in this context is a little bit different. And you're looking at short-term gains rather than long-term value. And so, and again, I don't want to do a deep dive here, but I do think that this is a little bit different than the typical predator control approach that we would take for a conservation site, and that needs to be factored in. For better or for worse, and I'm going to ask Kate or Ginny to correct me if I'm wrong, but for better or for worse, right now in the HCP and in the individual permits, the predator control doesn't actually factor into the detectability value. It's sort of a separate component. Right now, detectability is defined entirely by their search efficacy. Their predator control is there are standards that they have to meet. Again, somebody needs to correct me if I'm wrong on this, but there are standards that have to be met. And those standards, it is assumed in the document that if you meet these standards and you meet this detectability, that you are meeting the equivalent you are meeting your assumptions in the document. Kate, can you help me with this? Am I getting this right? I don't want to say something on the record if I'm getting it wrong.
Close to right. I mean, we have always said that the discovery rate is a combination of both factors, your searcher efficiency and whether or not you're conducting adequate predator control. And we do this because, as Loyal keeps pointing out, you need both searcher efficiency and carcass retention information to really know what your discovery rate is. And so we are making an assumption that if they can pass this bar of effective predator control, doesn't mean a zero tolerance, just means effective, then the discovery rate assigned to that facility could be justified. Now, we've had a lot of challenges in expressing to the group what we need to see to evaluate efficacy. And some of the details we literally didn't receive until yesterday. So it's kind of hard to figure out what's going on. But this is the first year out of 3.
Well, yeah.
Emily,
I need to find like over there.
I agree with
Catherine, can you, sorry about that. Catherine, can you mute? Sorry, go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Sorry.
Michelle, I agree. This is a different situation than a lot of the other predator control programs going on. But the question really comes back into is what Kate just said: is the predator control being effective? And, you know, if you take one rat out or one cat out, does it make a difference? If you take 10 cats out, does it make a difference? You know, where's that threshold of effectiveness that's really going to make a difference in terms of that discovery rate connection, in terms of what, you know, whether you're going to find the birds that have actually been affected by take. And so that's what I'm really looking at is it's not just, you know, what are the methodologies that you use in the Mauka areas to do it that Lindsay's using and others are using up there, but it's really in terms of your effectiveness, in terms of, because we've seen this all along in so many different projects. You know, if they're saying anything about predator control, a lot of times it's just, you know, here's the number we caught. What does it mean? It doesn't mean anything, quite frankly, because, you know, it doesn't have any context in terms of whether that's an effective level that's really reducing the risk. And so that's what I'm really trying to get at is trying to get some of the expertise to talk about that level of effectiveness and what it takes to get to that point. That's where it's not so much, you know, that's really what we need to home in on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
no, I hear you.
I'm not reading it from the HCP right now, Jim, but I seem to recall the language being such that a reduction in the presence of predators is really important. Being able to demonstrate a reduction in the presence. And maybe that's just a starting point from which to build upon them, maybe. But I mean, I don't think the language is any more specific than that.
Yeah, no, I think that's really true, Greg. But a reduction, you know, again, it gets down to the core issue: is a reduction at an effective threshold level?
Mhm.
Does it take you to that point where it makes a difference, or is it just otherwise you're wasting your money, you're wasting your efforts by putting that out there and really not getting the return you're making the assumption you're getting.
I appreciate that.
So just wanted to clarify then, we've got an action item suggested by Jim. Thank you. That we have a future agenda item focused on predator control efficacy in these sort of more urban, suburban areas, as opposed to the natural areas. And we bring in an expert or several experts to sort of to give brief the committee and the public. Is that, Jim, does that capture your request?
Yeah, and I think we can sort of you know, hone that a little bit in terms of you know who and what and so forth. But I you know, that would be, I think, very useful, because I think it could help us get to not only on these projects, but other ones too that we've dealt with over the years in terms of naming you know, taken and so forth.
Yeah, good point. And so I've made a note of that. If you have further, you know, if you wanted to think about it more and have, you know, after the meeting and make suggestions about who and what and how, then feel free to communicate that via email.
Okay. Would you like me to stop sharing my screen now, Lainey?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thanks again, everybody. Okay.
Thanks, Gregory. Oh, I just wanted to make a note. I forgot to mention it at the time. Loyal did drop off at 1:57 p.m. And said thank you to the presenters and staff. So I think is there any more comments or questions for Kauaʻi Department of Transportation's presentation, including any public testimony? No. Okay. So I would like to take a short recess. It's 2:50. We can take a 5-minute break, and then what we have left is the remaining items under remaining sections under item 4. And we were just going to, because the participants do not have their biologists present, we're just going to open it for comment, but they're not going to be able to answer questions. But we will be, just as a reminder, we'll be scheduling another meeting very soon. So right now it's just comments on the materials that have been received, but we will not be able to get questions. So
we're going to do the county first though, right?
Oh, Sorry. Yeah, thank you, Michelle. Yes, I overlooked a page. Yes, we've got Part H, Hawaii County. Okay, sorry about that. Do you want to take a short break now, or do you want to launch into the county agenda item?
Either way, before we go, I'm going to switch with Bob, and Bob's going to take over the USGS seat again.
Okay, thanks, Jim.
Sorry it took so long to get back. I learned a lesson about trying to fill a prescription in Hilo on a Friday afternoon.
I think we could take a short break, Lainey, but just as a heads up, I do have a hard stop at 3:30.
Okay, so maybe we'll take a really quick 5-minute break and be back at, well, it's 2:52. So can we say 2:57 on the dot? And then we'll go to item 4H.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Hi, can the committee members turn on their cameras when they come back? Thanks, Melissa. And thanks, Bob. Okay. Oh, and Kavika, you're back. Great. Did we lose? Were you there the whole time? Oh, you were. Oh, sorry. Great. Okay, I'd like to move on to the next agenda item because we are running late. The next agenda item is 4H for Kauaʻi County.
Hey, good afternoon.
Hi.
Okay, so I want to share screen. Okay, can you guys see that?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, how's it, everybody? Good afternoon. I'm Pat Porter with the County of Kauaʻi, Department of Parks and Recreation. So I'll be giving the presentation on behalf of the county today. So, okay, so our same as everybody who presented, permit issued in June 2020, 30-year term. Just a little history on, I'm sure William, you folks know William from before. I'm sure he gave a background, but I'll give a background on the county and where we're at. So it was the HCP responsibilities were handed down to the Department of Parks and Recreation because of the amount of parks facilities that were under the county that were affected by the HCP. And so that's how the Parks Department was given this responsibility. Under the Parks Department, we assigned it under the Planning Development Division. And that's where William, who presented last year, was the Chief of Planning and Development. William since has left, and so there was a little bit of turnover. And so I'll be doing a presentation this year for the Parks Department. Okay. So this is taken straight up from the PIP for our authorized take. Okay, so take reported in 2022. We reported none, no take this year, but recently we were in contact with the agencies and we were informed that there may have been some take that occurred on county property. And so we are working with Fish and Wildlife to confirm that. And I think some of that may be due to some communication issues with our turnover in our planning development section. And so I can talk a little bit more about that after. And so we're thinking there may be 3 or 4 incidents of take, but we're still confirming that with Fish and Wildlife. Direct and indirect take since permit issuance. Since we've been presenting, we've presented none. However, since this issue came up this year, we'll be working with the agencies to make sure that is the case, and we'll confirm this also. Okay, facility predator control and monitoring efforts during 2022. So category 1, category 2, no predator control and monitoring is occurring in those facilities. Category 3, we have a total of 37 predator control facilities that are under category 3. 20 This includes 20 individual facilities, which is a total of 13 sites that are covered by the predator control contract that we have. In this past year, I think you guys have a copy of the annual predator control report. There were 190 cats removed total. This is between all the sites. 190 cats removed, and there were 1,356 and a half trapping nights. That's just total numbers. 31 of these sites have lights on.
Pat, sorry to interrupt. I'm not sure, you may not be seeing it, but we're seeing like dozens of cursors for some reason showing up on the screen, and it's very distracting. I'm not sure if you can do anything about it, but maybe if you're moving the cursor around, if you could not do that, that might help.
Okay.
I've never seen that before, so I have no idea how that is happening, but it's much better now. Yeah, I think it's just if you just not move the cursor, that might really help. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, so as a note, 31 facilities have lights on under Category 3 during the duration of the night. All Category 3 facilities are monitored daily in the AM. This is during fledgling season. And that's usually the start of the workday for the staff. It's 6 a.m. Between 6 a.m. and 6:30 is usually the start time. And then also staff monitoring is supplemented by our predator control contractor as well. Category 4, we do monitoring when there's a down seabird reported. And then Category 5, the only one we're really concerned with is the stadiums where we have high school night football games. Yeah. Changes in seabird response during the 2022 season. We didn't do any modifications to any lights. We didn't change any facilities. We did have the ordinance passed in March of 2022 that prohibited feeding feral animals or feral cats in county properties, specifically under parks jurisdiction. And we also, in all of our parks permits, we added a section, outlining the rules and then the information for the fledgling season. So that's listed on our permits issued. So everybody that gets a permit gets all the rules and requirements that are set during the fledgling season. And then we were able to lock in a service agreement with SOS in last month for this calendar year 2023. All right, for training, we continue to do our outreach and training in high schools. It's mainly related to the high school night football games. We only had one football game that was a true night game last season. We as part of new hires for the county, there's already an orientation process that they have to go through. So as part of that orientation process, we've added in a training video for all new hires related to the HCP. And so this past year we had 101, in 2022 we had 101 new hires that all went through the training for that. And then prior to fledgling season, there's a list of, we have 39 staff on this list that are assigned to certain facilities that they work at, and they do an annual training for the monitoring side of their facility. So we have, for each of those 39, every year they're given a handbook that was developed by one of our staff, Kat, who's on here as well. And she also developed the video, and then along with the handbook is a rescue kit with all of the materials and equipment that's listed in the HCP. And then we have a web page that was created by Kat as well, and so that's the website. I want to note that that Catherine, she's pulling double duty for this. She actually runs our permit office, a Parks and Recreation permit section, and that's every permit from camping to pavilions to sports fields to commercial activities. And then as well, on top of that, she's taken on the load with the Seabirds as well, and she's done a great job. Challenges that we face, just the uniqueness of our facilities, the variety of our facilities is a big one, and then the locations and proximity of the facilities, they're just scattered island-wide. Under predator control, funding and just operational capacity is a challenge with the amount of facilities that we have, and as well as the populations of feral cats out there. Vandalism and theft has been an issue with our contractors. They've mentioned that a number of the properties in our category 3 and 4 are very high risk for vandalism and theft. And then they've also reported that TNR practices are still ongoing. Hard to point to who is doing it, but they are ongoing on the island, and especially on public lands. And then despite the new ordinance being passed, there is feeding that is going on within the parks and other public spaces as well. And then the union issues we have with adding assignments and job duties to people's job descriptions is also limiting our ability to expand the monitoring workforce that we would need to cover more facilities. Let's see. Proposed changes to Seabird program for 2023. We're looking at trying to increase our predator control efforts. We are going through our budget process right now. Just yesterday, I finished a hearing, our budget hearing with the county council. And in our budget request this year, we are asking for additional funds, specifically for predator control and other things tied to the HCP. So this is still needs to go through administration and council approval. But the ask has been submitted. And then we want to, as tied to predator control, we want to work with the agencies to explore and develop a more cost-effective process to measure the efficacy of our predator control efforts. We want to increase our community outreach, educational programs and partnerships. We want to try to get the word out to more the information and the word out to more places on the island, more different sectors of the community. So we're going to try to look at ways to do that. And then this next item is kind of going back to the first two slides. about our reporting. And I think we have to improve our communication with our partners, especially SOS and then the agencies, and get better dialogue and communication so that we can report more accurately. And I think with our agreement, our formal agreement that was just executed with SOS, I think we're on the right track for that. And then we're gonna work on our signage. We have a local nonprofit that's interested in helping us with our signage, and that's more directly tied to the feeding of cats in the parks, but we can also expand that too. So those are things that we're looking at to work on this year. And that's it.
Thank you, Pat. Wanted to open it up to questions and comments from the committee.
I know we're pretty short on time, so I'll ask a fairly direct question, and I may have missed something. I may be a little bit confused, but the low number of discoveries, given the number of sites and given the apparent lack of predator control at the site, makes me think that whatever the calculation is for discovery rate is probably too high. Because I'm guessing there's an extremely low discovery rate given the combination of predators and the number of sites and all of that. But I don't know if that's going to speak.
This is the discovery rate for which program?
So I mean, it just seems like the number of birds found was very low considering the number of sites, and given the predator control and different stuff, I would guess that there's a whole lot of unfound birds. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm wondering if you can just speak to how you think you might get closer to better numbers for finding birds and for improving predator control and monitoring. I'm not sure if you've been listening to the other talks, but you know, the kind of monitoring that would show how many predators you've got and how you can get closer at getting them removed.
Yeah, so that was one of the goals that I put on the last slide, was that showing that the efficacy of our predator control efforts, and that is what I was leading to, was that you know, if it is, I know that was the monitoring, what you folks are calling monitoring, is probably, I mean, is one of the ways to do that. You know, get a baseline population number, I'm guessing is what you guys are talking about, and then compare that to the amount of cats that were removed. Yeah, is what I'm guessing. That's what you're talking about. And so that's what we want to try to work with the agencies to figure out a cost-effective way that we can do that. We can get that data on the baseline numbers for each location.
I don't think it needs to be so fancy as population size or that type of thing, but having a good program for knowing when you've got cats at a site and responding to remove them, I think is what I'm wanting to see. There's a whole lot of tools for estimating population sizes, but these are very small sites with a permeable, you know, border. So there's no point in trying to get baseline population. It's just, do you have cats? Yes, go remove them. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and so that's why we are requesting more funding this year. So we have met with our contractor, and we came up with a list of additional sites to look at trapping. And so what the contractor was able to do was to take a look at these sites, take a look at, you know, the variables at each site, and then come up with, they were able to grade each site as far as trappability, and they have their criteria on what is, you know, what is a good, what is 1 to 4, and what is a good site to trap and what is a bad site to trap, and there's some criteria involved with that. And so we came up with a list of that. They submitted it. I told them, just go ahead and submit to us what you guys think, and give us a cost estimate on it. It's pretty much, the cost estimate is tripled what our current contract is. And so we did submit that for our budget this year, and we'll see what happens. We'll see, we'll see what we get out of our submission, and then once we know how much we got for the next fiscal year, we'll be able to either hopefully add sites if we're awarded the money, and if not, then we'll stick with our current contract.
Pat, I really appreciate you walking us through this, and appreciate you being here today. I'm going to say some pretty blunt statements, but I want to make sure that you know that this isn't directed towards you specifically, and you don't, just know that I don't mean this to be harsh, but I want to be clear. Where the county is right now is insufficient, and it makes me really nervous about the level of work that needs to be done in order to get the county properties good to go. Getting adequate survey efficacy at all of the properties, getting good predator control at all of the properties. I get the sense that there's a dollar figure that's driving what can be done, and the benchmark isn't the dollar figure. The benchmark is the standards that are in the HCP that the county committed to under their permit. And I hear that the county is working that direction, but where the county is right now is not okay. And it makes me, as in my Fish and Wildlife Service role, pretty nervous. It makes me, in my role in ESRC, pretty nervous. And I would be lying to you if I didn't say that. So I want to impress upon the fact that this is not a great spot for the county to be in at the moment. And we are here and ready and willing to help make sure that you have the information and support that you need in order to get ready for the upcoming fallout season. But there's going to have to be some pretty significant scale up in capacity and activity in order to get ready for the next upcoming fallout season. And obviously we'll put that in writing and meet with you individually and all sorts of other stuff. But I wanted to put that out there now so that there wasn't any confusion later about my concerns.
Yeah, understood.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think that'll help too. I think we need to do more education with our elected officials also. And so I'll probably be leaning on you folks for information that I can use for that as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
We definitely recognize that you're dealing with an added layer of complexity given the number of sites and the remoteness of some of them. We get that, but there is still a standard that needs to be met.
I had a couple of questions and comments if you're done, Michelle. Yeah, I wanted to echo what Michelle has said. DLNR is also very concerned about compliance, and I totally understand where you're coming from in terms of budget. We deal with the same thing, but that, like Michelle said, that there needs to be compliance with the permit no matter what, and we're really concerned about that. I had a question about, I was super excited about the cat beating ordinance that Kauaʻi County passed. That's great work on that. That's incredible. But as you know, passing the ordinance is step one, and I was just wondering if there's been, like, I know that the hard part is enforcement. Can you speak to, is there been enforcement, or is it sort of at the education stage? I was just wondering where the county is at with that.
Yeah, so our enforcement, so the two entities that are able to enforce the ordinance are KPD, of course, and then our park rangers. And So currently we have 4 park rangers island-wide, and we have 4 vacancies that we're trying to fill, that we're having a hard time filling. It's not a very attractive position. You know, people make a lot more being security guard at a hotel than they would working for the county. So we're having a hard time with that.
Yeah.
But they are very, we did trainings with them. They essentially have to catch people in the act to be able to enforce it. And so when they have approached people when they see them, and they come back and they report it to us that they have, it's mainly on the east and north side is where they have caught people. But it has to be in the act. And so, you know, we're working on our signage program as well, same time, and trying to fill those positions also to have more presence out there.
Okay. The training, I think you mentioned, is that Catherine Leonard who's online as the training and the video? Hi, Catherine. I was wanting to see, like, you know, does Catherine have a background in seabird biology and searching? And I was just wondering if you can speak to that, or is this something that we can help with?
Yeah, we're always open to help. So Catherine is actually she's the head of our permit section for the county. So, you know, her background is not in any sort of, we don't have a position, you know, under the county even that has any type of biologist background or any kind of conservation background. So so she's taking on this responsibility, you know, additionally to what she's meant to be doing. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe we'll work with you on that.
Yeah,
with the branch.
Yeah.
Sean, sorry. I saw Sean just put his hand up.
Yeah, thanks for recognizing my hand emoji or whatever it's called. I didn't want to butt in, but regarding that cat feeding ordinance, which is, as I understand it, only applies to land owned by the county. Do you accept vigilante reports because that's exactly what we have at Waipoli is cat feeding on county property. And so can members of the general public, you know, send photographic evidence of this going on and expect anything to be done about it?
From parks properties, from county properties, is what you're saying?
It's on county property.
Yeah.
Waipoli Cat Colony.
Yeah. Send them over. Send it over.
To you personally, or
to our office, parks.
Okay.
Yeah. Great. To parks@kauaʻi.gov would be the best.
Got it. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
No, thanks.
Pat, I know we've got limited time, but I did want to ask, I know that the county permit also has some requirements related to sea turtle nesting and monitoring and those activities. Are those getting done and on the timeline that's in the HCP?
I'm gonna have to check on that.
Okay. I think it's mostly for the beach parks, but I could be wrong on that. I think there's a map in the PIP.
Yeah.
Anyone else got any questions or comments?
Last note, I agree with your statement earlier that the coordination with SOS is pretty critical, especially given the breadth of your properties. So just making sure that that gets resolved and that the take numbers get updated to reflect that. Thanks.
I had a request from the staff regarding the format of the report. It's very long with a lot of blank pages and repeated information. It just makes it difficult to digest. So I was wondering if you could maybe do a bit more summarizing of information and make it a little bit more readable.
The county's report.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then can you provide information about search routes and photos of lights? We have a concern about in the category 3 facilities. We recommend a lighting assessment. It's done yearly prior to the Seabird season. And as mentioned before, the predator control needs to be increased, especially at those high-risk sites. So I understand what you're saying. You mentioned about waiting on the budget, but we do want to see is that predator control effort and monitoring increased, because we, like Michelle said, we don't believe it's adequate at this point.
Yeah. Yep. That's the main reason we requesting it in the budget too. So.
Understood. Yeah.
Certainly I'll defer to you, Pat, or the county broadly, but it sounds like capacity, even at administration level, is a limiting factor. And that may be something to think about too, right? I don't know what percentage of your job is dedicated to this or Catherine's, and I think it might be worth doing a real assessment about what it's going to take to manage this project from an administrative level and make sure that that's adequately taken into account in job duties.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've identified that before.
Okay. Any other questions for Pat or recommendations? Okay, thank you, Pat, for that presentation. We look forward to working with you and continuing to make changes.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, guys.
Okay, so we're done with the presentations, I believe. Yep. So now we have the 4 remaining items, A, D, E, and F. And these are the ones, remember that the biologist is not available to address any questions. We had a request from the committee that we do continue with these items, but it will need to be restricted to making comments only. And I'd just like to point out that this might actually be helpful for the participants in terms of when they do, because getting those comments from the committee might be helpful when they do come back, when we do come back to have that follow-up meeting.
I just wanted to check. Michelle said she had a hard stop at 3:30. I'm just noting it's 3:32. Just wanted to check.
I have a reprieve for a few minutes. I'm lucky enough that my spouse just went to go pick up the kid. That being said, I have to admit I am not prepared to give comments on these 4 projects today. I had also thought that they were deferred and so did not prepare any remarks and would probably prefer a presentation before making any further comments.
Okay, fair enough.
And I'll note, given that we ran out of time, I mean, if he had been here, I'm not sure how the time would have gone differently today. But just noting that it looks like we didn't actually have enough time to cover all 9 participants in the same day. It might be something to keep in mind for scheduling next year, that we may want to intentionally schedule them split between a couple of days. Yeah.
Good point. Well, I want to check with Kavika, because Kavika was the one who raised, you know,
Thank
how
you.
are you feeling?
Can you hear me okay? I'm still at the
Yeah.
Capitol. So I'm sorry, I'm juggling over here, so I don't have time to give my comments, but main thing I wanted to open up an opportunity for any member to share comments, because every time we try to talk about something that's not on the agenda, we're told we can't talk. So I just wanted to make sure we had an opportunity.
Yeah, understood. Thanks, Kavika.
I'll just say a couple comments. You know, I feel like a couple of these properties had big improvements in searcher efficiency for the decoys, and that's great. But there still appeared to be some pretty significant challenges at the Royal Sonesta. And, you know, looking forward to hearing them talk about how they're going to continue with that improvement. And you know, I haven't gone back to look at how the Sonesta and the Sheraton, how their final scores after improvement rank with the other properties to see if it's, you know, a sufficient improvement. But yeah, I think it's great that they've come up, but they had a long way to go to begin with. So those will be important justifications for me to see that improvement is across the board and in line with what we're seeing in other properties.
Okay. Thanks, Bob. I also don't have any comments. I'm going to wait till the presentations are given, but I do want to give the opportunity to the committee members who may have any comments.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I missed it earlier, but did you folks talk about the formatting of the reports already?
No, not yet.
I found the formatting more hurtful than helpful. I got very lost and I couldn't tell what was going on with those reports. It seemed to be just a collation of printed out online forms or something like that. There's no narratives. A lot of the fields that were filled in, there were more words that could fit in the box, and we only saw the words that were visible. We couldn't see the text outside. The links weren't actual links, so I'd have to type in several dozens of things to get to the actual links, and it was not helpful at all. And I don't understand how those are even can be considered reports. I don't remember ever getting a report that looked like that before.
Okay. Thanks, Kavika. We'll make sure that's addressed.
And well, address, I don't, what are those things that we got? What were those things? Were those DOFA fields that got filled in and got collated somehow? What, I don't understand what those we were looking at.
Hey, do you can you speak to that?
I don't understand why there's not a narrative to explain what we're looking at. It's just a collection of online forms and a few pictures, some of them tiny, some of them ginormous, and a few tables that were not explained.
Lisa has her hand up. I want to let her talk a bit.
Okay, go ahead. Oh, Lisa, you're on mute.
Sorry, yeah. So our permit is written so that unfortunately, Lindsay is the one who writes the report for all of us. So those individual sets of data are what we agreed on with Lindsay as to how we report data to her. And they are, of course, compiled into her report and available to the committee, but the permit requires Lindsay to write the annual report. So that's why you see her report for everybody. And then those data sheets are what we agreed as to how we report the data to her.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. I didn't make the connection there. Is Lindsay still on?
No.
No.
I don't see her, but I think maybe it's important to note I think that's one of the things Lindsay was raising earlier, is that a number of the reports came to her fairly late. And so it made it fairly, I mean, you can see how many fields there are to collate and stuff. It makes her task very difficult when the reports don't get to her on time. So I think that was in the context of that conversation.
That makes more sense now. Thank you.
If I could add to the description of the forms, because I helped to develop those forms for the purpose that that Lisa described. The way that it is formatted is there's a base form that provides basic information about each facility that is included in each participant's permit. And so that'll have information like, what is the facility, for example. It also has the permitted take numbers and things of that nature. And then for specific detailed information, each of those base forms refers to an addendum sheet and a particular box on an addendum sheet. And if you go to the addendum sheet, that's where you read the narrative text that is supposed to provide a detailed description of, for example, your self-monitoring protocols, your animal control efforts, and so on and so forth. So, if you're looking for a whole bunch of text that again describes the activities that each facility did, or that each participant did at each facility, it's the addendum sheet that has that text. And then there are also separate sheets that detail all your take and the down Seabird reports that you file. Another sheet that details all your training efforts, and another sheet that details all your outreach efforts. And what may have happened, and I think one of the reasons the links might not work, is because all of that is done in an Excel form. And for whatever reason, it was decided that a PDF is what we should turn in. And I'm not sure that the links, when you save the Excel form as a PDF, or at least the way I did it, was I just printed it to a PDF form. I'm not sure the links get preserved there. So the links may have been deactivated by the conversion process from the original Excel form to the PDF form. But in a lot of cases, those links take you to things like photographs, the individual down Seabird forms, and so forth. So, I mean, its original form as an format as an Excel form, it has quite a lot of information in it, and perhaps we just didn't do a good job of translating that to something that the ESRC could follow along with. But as Lisa said, it was created so that all that information would be available to Lindsay when she did her annual report. And I know that a lot of the text that is in that addendum form is basically just cut and pasted directly into her annual report. So when you go to the section in her annual report that is a participant by participant breakdown of information, it's a duplication of what's in this spreadsheet. So now that's just the background of how the reports came to be in this format.
Okay, that's a helpful explanation. Thank you. Because as I was looking at it, it appeared to be that there was a lot of information that we didn't have access to. So that was frustrating for me. So The next time we meet, I guess we're gonna have a follow-up presentation from the other ones. Could we call Lindsay back and just to ask questions about how information is transferred, raw data is transferred from those forums and into her report? Because it still seems to me like there's a lot that that fell through the cracks in the process.
So Kavika, you're requesting a agenda item for Lindsay to discuss how the reports are formatted and the information is transferred. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So one request for me in regards to the agenda items that we're following up on in the next meeting. So we had with extra time and the benefit of having had the other presentations today, I would really like Reggie's presentations in this next meeting to, in a very focused way, show us where they are meeting the goals, where they feel that they have not met the goals for this year, and what they're doing to address those in a very specific way that avoids fuzzy language. So just, you know, if you feel like you're there, say it. If you're not there and there's things you're doing to improve, say it. But just want to request that with a little bit of time to prepare like this, a little extra time to prepare, that have those things to the point. I know last year, which would normally be the year where we could take a look at the presentations and say, okay, here's what we want to see in future years. Last year, there were no presentations, so we weren't able to ask that. But I know that Reggie's been doing this a long time, and so would expect to definitely see this no matter what, and for sure see it with the benefit of some extra days of preparation.
Understood. And for last year, that, you know, please understand our group made a collective decision that because Lindsay was giving the PowerPoint, we would not have individual PowerPoints. So that was not Reg's decision, or that was a group decision last year. So we'll take that into account, and as we ask him to do his presentation. And then if you have one of the presentations today that you thought met those standards and can point us to it, that would be helpful.
Yeah, and I know that I believe it was a collective decision last year, as you're saying, but Reggie's been doing this a while, and he knows what we typically expect in the ESRC meetings. And so when that didn't happen last year, it was especially a surprise for folks who we've seen presentations from before, and they have kind of a standard of expectation.
You know, put that on me, not on Reggie. I told him not to present a report because it was a group decision, and you can see with the format of our slides, we try to make things look similar so that they're easier to understand at these meetings. So we realized when our reports go to Lindsay and they're 600 pages long and she's got to summarize them, she needs things that look similar with data reported in the same cells from each of us so she can compile it. And it's the same thing as we're doing these presentations. So that was our decision last year. And so when Reg was prepping for the meeting, I told him, no, Lindsay does the presentation for everybody. We don't do individual presentations. So don't put that on Reggie in any way at all. It was you know, that was just how we prepared for last meetings. And this year we'll have PowerPoints.
Thank you for having them this year. I think if someone's talking, I'd love to see visuals that go with what they're saying, because they're across the board were a lot of data being presented last year without the visuals.
Melissa, was there Lisa had asked, is there a presentation that was from today that that you think sort of met your expectations? That
I think as we were going through today, there were specifics that we said, hey, in future ones, we'd love to see this, or we'd love to see that. I think that's more what I'm speaking to.
Yeah, I see.
So for example, I commented on the ones where I liked, I really appreciated the ones that detailed out their searcher numbers, their predator numbers, you know, the specifics about what they're doing and what the outcomes of that were. So just requesting that things are specific.
Yeah, got it. Okay. Thanks.
Sorry, it's not a formatting issue so much as a content issue.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
Well, Lena, I still feel that some of the permittees are non-compliant, so can we be sure there's a voting action next time?
Yep.
We meet? Thank you.
Okay. And just to the committee members, we'll be sending out a draft agenda. We'll try to capture everything, but like Kate said, this, during these meetings, there's a lot going on. So, please review that draft, and if we missed anything, let us know. We'll do our best. Yeah. But thanks, Kavika and everyone else, I appreciate you raising your concerns, and I acknowledge that this is not the first time you've raised them. We will continue to try to improve things for the committee.
Much appreciated.
Okay. Well, do we have any other comments or questions or discussion or testimony in the public? No, it's been a long day. Well, I think.
Ladies, so just to clarify though, we are going to be, ESRC members will be looking for an email to schedule the makeup day for the 4 remaining permittees for KSHCP, in addition to another day in April for KIUC. And then
Yes.
I think that we have our quarterly meeting in May.
I don't know about that. I haven't looked that far ahead, but possibly. But yes,
Okay.
yeah, please look out for those. So we'll be having,
Can we have all the Kauaʻi things on the same day?
You mean the remainder of the KSHCP plus the KIUC?
Yeah,
That's-
I don't know if both of those
I don't think we
equal the
can
full
do-
day, but maybe not.
That's a long day.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and very different subject matters. And honestly, each is so important that I don't want to have to rush the committee through either of those projects. I'd rather, hope for a half day each, but make them on separate days.
Okay, that's fine.
But yeah, thanks for the thought, Kavika. I appreciate that. I'm all for efficiency too, but yeah, I agree with Kate. It's important that we allow enough time.
To clarify, I did just go back through the May calendar and I do not have anything on my calendar for May.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I'm going to make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. I'll take a vote. Please say aye.
Aye.
I think we have to be verbal. Aye. Okay. And that's 4. So meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.